This week, we welcome Theresa Lanowitz, Chief Evangelist at LevelBlue, to discuss why cyber resilience matters. In our second segment, we air two pre recorded interviews from Black Hat USA 2024 from LevelBlue and Menlo Security. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity, to increasing revenue, to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The LevelBlue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/LevelBlue. Cybersecurity, simplified. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1Password. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 361, recorded August 19th, 2024. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment today is my co-host, Mr. Ben Carr. I hope you're staying cool, Ben.
I am, yeah. It's been pretty warm. It's supposed to get warmer, but yeah, trying the best. Enjoying the pool right now.
Yes, my pool is in, but it's at about 93 degrees because the chiller's not on, so it's not really comfortable yet. We're getting there. This segment is sponsored by LevelBlue. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/LevelBlue. Theresa Lanowitz is the Chief Security Evangelist at LevelBlue, a strategic alliance between AT&T and Willjam Ventures that simplifies cybersecurity for the business fueling our global economy. With a distinguished career in the technology industry, Theresa is a globally respected leader known for her deep and diverse experience in cybersecurity. Theresa frequently speaks at major industry conferences, sharing her insights on high-tech trends, AI integration, and the evolving threat landscape. Theresa, welcome back to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's wonderful to be back here with you.
So the last time you were here, you were with ATT Cybersecurity. Now LevelBlue is a joint venture with AT&T Cybersecurity. So give us just a little background on the LevelBlue changes.
Just a quick background on LevelBlue, who we are, some of the changes. So LevelBlue, as you said in your intro, LevelBlue is a joint venture between AT&T and Willjam Ventures. And our goal is to really act as a strategic extension of your team. And we do that through 3 ways. First, we help to predict your security investment through our managed security services. Secondly, through our cybersecurity consulting, we help to protect your business intelligence. And thirdly, we help to mitigate risk and foster innovation with our LevelBlue Labs threat intelligence team. And all in all, that is cybersecurity simplified.
Wonderful. I love simplified. 3 points. That's all we humans can manage, right?
That's
Just
all we
three
need,
points.
right?
And you did it. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
perfect. All right. So today we're going to talk about cyber resilience and why does it matter? And this has been a topic out there for a while, right? The fifth domain came out. Richard Clark wrote the book around cyber resilience and why resilience was important. We go through a pandemic, right? Um, and we're in this environment now where I think everybody starts to realize resiliency matters this day and age. So why cyber resilience? Why is it such an important topic to understand?
So you framed it perfectly, I believe. And if you think about cyber resilience, a lot of people don't understand what cyber resilience is. And cyber resilience is this ability to look at the entire IT estate, which is complex and unwieldy, and then what happens to that IT estate if it goes awry for some reason, whether through a cyber attack, through a man-made disaster, or through some natural disaster like a fire, an earthquake, a flood, a hurricane, and so on. So cyber resilience is saying, all right, here's how we react, here's how we cope as an organization when our entire IT estate is at risk. And that's cyber resilience. And I think so many people think just because you throw the word cyber in front of it, it's that cybersecurity team, it's that responsibility of the CISO. And nothing could be further from the truth because the CISO has to be able to communicate with the line of business, the CIO, the CTO, the stakeholders, maybe in the supply chain, any variety of people inside of that organization or inside of that business.
And obviously, cybersecurity resilience is a subset of cyber resilience, which is where most people think of cyber resilience as more on the security front. But as you just stated, it's a little broader than that.
Right. And we found in our research too that that is a big problem, that there's that conflation between cybersecurity resilience, how you're protecting that IT estate through your cybersecurity controls and protocols, and cyber resilience. So we found that there's conflation, and oftentimes organizations are saying, well, wait a minute, we're not going to talk about or fund this thing or really be concerned about this thing called cyber resilience because we're already giving you a certain amount of money. You already have a team for cybersecurity. So, cyber resilience just doesn't make sense to many people.
Interesting. So, as you went out and did this research, there's a research report. I have it linked in the show notes. Where are the struggles? Like, where are the challenges around? You mentioned them a little bit, but I think your research pulled out some very interesting details on where some of the big barriers are to cyber resilience first, and then I think there's some different ones for cybersecurity resilience.
Correct. Yeah, there are absolutely different barriers for cyber resilience versus cybersecurity resilience. For cyber resilience, the top barrier, and this is just it's very telling. 72% of our survey participants said that their governance teams do not understand cyber resilience because it is conflated with cybersecurity. And what we're also finding with cyber resilience, there are a whole host of things that organizations or teams might have to report on that are coming from some sort of compliance initiatives. They just can't do that. They just can't get the information because that part of the business hasn't been automated yet, or it's a new compliance requirement that's coming in and hasn't been automated. And in many cases, that CISO is seen as that's the cyber person, so that cyber person is the person who's responsible for this idea of cyber resilience. And in many cases, what we're also seeing is that the CISO is not on equal footing with the CTO and the CIO. And you would think that in 2024, that would certainly be the case because you said at the introduction, we came through this pandemic, and the pandemic was this perfect storm for digital transformation. We had we had a problem, the pandemic. The tooling, the technology was so much better. Everything got so much better. Economically, the prices came down for things such as cloud, all the tooling in the cloud. So we went through with these big digital transformation initiatives, and what we're finding out is that they're not complete. And this idea of cyber resilience did not really carry through, and the CISO did not end up getting that proverbial seat at the table that the CIO and the CTO have.
So a couple areas I want to kind of go into. I mean, I was waiting for Ben to say something about the seat at the table personally because we've talked about it so much.
There's a ton of stuff there, right? So like at the very beginning of it, the whole cyber resilience, like you touched on a big beef of mine, right? It's everybody wants to throw cyber in front of everything, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like the old the joke where a bunch of people meet and it's like doctor, doctor, doctor. Like it's not all cyber, right? Like we use this term broadly, and I think for people in cyber, I've even had a problem with cybersecurity being the overarching term for all of security, right? Because there are things that technically really aren't cyber, right? But it's just become cyber, and so the CISO gets held responsible. I think oftentimes it's yeah, you handle the resilience piece, but I don't own as a CISO a lot of the resilience areas, right? That's the CIO or the CTO or the CPO. Like
Right.
it's in their wheelhouse. And so I think rightly to now to tied into the backside of this, without a seat at the table, it's impossible to own that, right? Because you go ask and you say, "Hey, what are we doing for resilience?" And you get the, "Hey, leave me alone. This isn't your area." Well, if it's not my area, then I don't want to own it, right? So it's just, I think it's a very challenging seesaw that we sit on of being held responsible for stuff but not having the authority to actually get stuff done. So do you see it that way, Teresa?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% concur with you. And you brought up maybe the CIO should step up and take a little bit more responsibility for this idea of cyber resilience. And that's one of the things we identify in our research is that the CIO is in the business of the technology. So they have to make sure that the technology stack is working. And that technology stack has gotten so cumbersome. If you're an organization that's been around for more than a year, unless you were born on the web, born on the edge, born in the cloud, you have a lot of legacy issues that you still have to deal with. And the CIO is responsible for making sure that that technology works, the business of that technology. And the CISO is really about that security operations and making sure that the proper security controls, the proper security protocols are being implemented. And then that CTO is really about the idea of innovation. And those the CTO, the CIO, and the CISO, they oftentimes have conflicting priorities, even though they want to get to that common business outcome.
And that's been the long-term challenge, right? Is the
Yeah.
conflicts in their agendas and their relationships often make it really difficult for the matrix reporting structures that exist within an organization, right? So if the CISO is reporting to the CIO, this is where we see, conflicts arise, and it becomes really difficult because you don't want to, the CISO's typically said, "Hey, I'm going to call out something that's the responsibility of the CIO." So how does that get done? I mean, this is where resiliency becomes really, really difficult. And I think you called it out really accurately. You talk about legacy, but even if you're a company starting out right now and you're building everything ground up from the cloud, like you've got a ton of APIs, interconnections between applications, cloud dependencies, and I think the CrowdStrike issue that we saw recently, that's a great example of like I almost railed it when it was called a cyber incident. It wasn't a cyber incident. It was a cyber application, but it's the same as if SAP went down, right? Or your email system went down. It's an application going down. It's an availability issue. It's not really a security issue, right?
Well, then you bring in the whole supply chain too, because your supply
Yeah.
chain can have an impact on what goes on inside of your organization, whether that is the physical supply chain or the software supply chain.
Yeah, and so I, it's a business resiliency problem first. Not we say cyber, but I mean it's really a business resiliency problem. I think
Mm.
at first, right, is how does a business stay resilient to any and all activities, whether they're cyber related or non-cyber related, right? Because to the CrowdStrike point, it wasn't a cybersecurity incident; it was a supplier incident that created a business outage for certain clients, right? It was a
It just
business
happened to
resiliency
be
issue.
a cyber application that was being
Right.
used. But
Right.
that, if it was a legal application we were using, we wouldn't call it a legal issue. We would still call it an
Right.
availability issue, right?
We'd call it an IT outage or an IT glitch,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Everybody just
Exactly.
loves to use that word glitch. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing is I wanted to talk about a little bit is you called this a governance challenge. And I find this funny having spent 20
Mm.
plus years in the early days of governance, risk management, and compliance. If we treat business resiliency as a compliance governance issue, we're always going to fall short because we're going to do the minimum, check the box to say, yep, I got business resilience, and never be business resilient, right? Because the other finding that came out of this, Theresa, that I thought was very interesting is how innovation is driving the agenda with higher risk tolerances, which I think is interesting, right? We talk a lot about the security folks, the CISOs need to be risk managers and manage risk. And what you have in some of the cyber resilience stuff is that innovation is driving the business forward. It's increasing risk, which means all the executives, including the CISO, need to be having a business risk conversation at the table. And that's the other thing we talk about a lot on the show, but your research points to it as well.
Listen to this stat. 83%. So 83% of our survey participants said innovation brings in risk. And 73% said, we don't care. We want the innovation. We want the innovation, and the risk, figure it out. Because the innovation is so powerful for the business. And you think about this new type of innovation that we're seeing, computing that we know the perimeter has been dissolved for many, many years. So computing that goes beyond the four walls of the organization. And we saw it start with telemedicine. That was innovation at the time, 4 years ago, telemedicine. Now we don't think anything of it. We visit our doctors regularly on screen. We very rarely go into a doctor's office. Then you look at things such as autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles, autonomous delivery on the streets of a city. Things such as fleet tracking, things such as managing a power grid, not having people on oil rigs, being able to manage everything remotely. So there's a lot of innovation going on in every vertical market that you could possibly think of. And yes, it's introducing risk, but the innovation is outweighing the risk.
So, Theresa, I'm interested. Like you mentioned, 83% said innovation brings risk. I'm wondering, did the other 17%, did you categorize them as oblivious? Because that's kind of the definition, right? Like change brings risk with it. Like you can't have change without some percentage of risk. So, yeah, that's a funny stat to me.
When you have a stat such as that, you always wonder what were the other 17% in this case thinking? What were the other, 5, 10, 15, 17% thinking? But I agree with you. They just kind of categorized as, well, or maybe they're thinking they have all their risk managed. Maybe they are so locked down that their risk is completely managed.
Yeah, again, I would categorize that as oblivious if you think you have all your risks locked down.
Or they're not innovating, Ben. Like maybe they're not in an innovation cycle, right?
But the other stat you brought up about how many don't care, like that's the CISO's paradox, right? Is like you go into the boardroom and nobody cares. Because and is it that we're not contextualizing the problem and the risk correctly? Like, are we not articulating it, or do they truly not care?
Matt's shaking his head that we're not contextualizing.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think it's both, Ben. Right. I think this is the important piece that I took out of some of this research is that we have to contextualize the risk in business terms so that the business understands that the dollars they're investing from an innovation perspective have potentially risk associated with them, so they understand it so they can balance it. The problem is I don't think we do a good job in cybersecurity contextualizing the risk. Therefore, they don't know if they care or not because they don't know how to measure it, Ben.
Yeah. I mean, it tracks back to me of this, where does the CISO go? The evolution of the CISO, and like we've talked about it before, the evolution to a risk officer, right? And I think there are companies that have risk officers. They're typically larger enterprises, right? The large financials and stuff they have, and the cyber risk rolls up to that risk officer to whole. But yeah, we don't do a good job at contextualizing that outside of cyber, and there's a lot of other risks that come up, and I think that's maybe where this is headed.
And I don't think the CISO ever goes away. You're saying the cyber risk officer may emerge, but that CISO has a very important role as well.
Oh, for sure. But it may be like this. The CISO may be the risk, may become the risk officer, and maybe one of his direct reports becomes the entity that's specifically addressing risks around cyber, right? Like, I guess I mean the person with the true seat at the table that's actually able to have the discussion with the other e-staff members and actually get stuff done.
Able to have the business discussion, because I think
Yeah,
largely
that's right.
what we end up doing is we're in the technology business. We love the cool technology. We love the cool tools that come out. And I think for so long, that's where the CISO has gotten stuck, is the CISO goes to talk to the other executives. So the CIO, the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, the C suite, and talks about, well, look what our SIM logs show us. Look at how many attacks we prevented, because they're enamored with the technology. And the technology is incredible. The technology that we have in cybersecurity now, we've gotten over all the false positives that we used to have. The cybersecurity technology has evolved tremendously and does amazing things. But those other C-suite executives are concerned about the business, not so much about the technology. And I think that's where the CISO has to be able to come up with some better language, so to speak.
There's a multitude of things that transect to that. Is, look, one, I don't think we've done a good job internally in the security community of educating about like what that higher level business risks issues are and
Mhm.
how we translate and how you emerge at that. I think CISO, people have thought for a long time, hey, I want to be a CISO, but you can want to be something and actually understanding what it is you want to be are two different things. And when you really understand what a CISO is, a lot of people who want to be a CISO really, I think, in the end, decide it's not what they really want. They want to be a technologist and they want to dive into the cool tech, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the other thing is the rest of the e-staff and the board hasn't done a good job of mentoring, right? Hasn't done a good job of saying this is what we're really looking for, and coached, right? That mentor coach relationship of bringing people up, and yeah, so it's been a disconnect and been challenging.
And it's also about the processes, because, as you said, people say, "Oh, I want to be a CISO," and as you said, it's really, "I want to be a technologist focused on security,"
Yeah.
versus seeing where how those processes weave throughout the entire line of business and throughout the entire organization and the supply chain. So those processes are critically important. That the process part should not be ignored.
Right. So we talked a lot about cyber resilience challenges. Now let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity challenges that relate to cyber resilience, because your research also brings in some other very interesting points that are almost contrary to the cyber resilience challenges.
You're exactly right. And from a cybersecurity perspective, I think I'm not saying anything here that is new that people haven't thought about, but cybersecurity is largely siloed, under budgeted, and overlooked. And what we have in this research is the data to back that up. What we also found out is that cybersecurity is largely still, and it shocked us when we got this bit of research back, that cybersecurity is still largely reactive versus proactive. And cybersecurity budgets, they miraculously open up when there is some type of external event, a breach, a competitor's breach, some type of requirement that you need to implement for cybersecurity insurance. So when there's an external need, when there is that reaction versus being proactive and intentional, when there's a reaction, suddenly the cybersecurity budget opens up. And that's what we have to get away from, because we're talking about the CISO having that full seat at the table, being able to speak in a business language to the other C-level executives. But we don't see that. And we see that in how cybersecurity budgets are actually handled every year, in how cybersecurity is seen inside the organization, that it's largely reactive. So nobody's going and talking to the cybersecurity team and saying, hey, we have this really great new idea to put robots on our manufacturing floor. Come help us understand how we can protect these robots, a new endpoint in cybersecurity terms. Help us
That
understand how we can
conversation
protect
has
this.
never been had, Teresa. The
No,
conversation is, you put what on the factory floor?
yeah,
Connected to what? And it's operational now?
And what are we doing? And oh, that's the way the adversary came in. The adversary was able
Yeah,
to breach the robot,
right.
and now they've found, root
And
access to our
the
network.
cost, I mean, look, everyone rails about the cost, and it's certainly true. Costs keep going up. Like it's not a static game. You're always fighting the new thing. But if you look at the cost of the breach compared to the cost of the defense, like it's much cheaper, right? It's not as if like we're asking for something that's 2 times the cost of the breach. Um, you get ransomware and you make a $25 million payment, or recently there was the $75 million payment, right? Like that's a lot of money. The cyber defense didn't cost that much.
Right, right. And what this is basic, again, basic communication skills across those different silos. And we have allowed, in the general term of IT, we have allowed those silos to be built up over 4, 5, 6+ decades, back to the days of the mainframe. And it's not getting any better when it should be getting better, because everybody should be speaking the same language. Everybody should be speaking the language of business outcomes, innovation, and protecting the business assets, protecting the business.
Yeah, there's a stat in here. I have to read it because it goes to this point. 77% reveal their organizations are at risk due to barriers impacting their cybersecurity resilience strategies. Although that may be true, the question is that acceptable risk or not acceptable risk by the business, right? Nobody knows. They
Right.
Yeah.
think it's risk, but is it an acceptable level of risk or isn't it? That's the conversation the cybersecurity team should be having with the business leaders to say, here's the risk. Are you okay with it? Because it may be they might be okay with it and they might not be. See, that's the thing we got to get out of.
I'll say, Matt, that's a hard conversation, right? Having sat in the room, like even at the board level, and like coming in and saying, "Hey, what's your risk tolerance? What are you accept? What are you reasonably willing to accept?" And the blank stares you get back, it's fairly frustrating, right? It's like, yeah, I can tell you what I would tolerate, but like, what would you tolerate as fiduciaries responsible for the operation of the business? And so yeah, again, I don't. You go into the board meeting, you have 15 minutes, a half an hour maybe to present out of a 2-day board meeting, and it's like we never get to the actual conversation of, hey, let's have the deep dive discussion about our risk tolerance, what we're willing to accept, what are the strategies for buy down, do we buy more cyber tools, do we buy insurance, do we just accept their risk and document it and move on? Like there's a lot of strategy for this that can be put to play, but oftentimes it's just there's no time for it, right? We're not having those discussions. I think that's what we need to get out of that cycle and actually have, schedule a specific board discussion or executive discussion. That's a longer term discussion, and the discussions need to be centered around business topics, not around technical topics, to get the involvement.
And it's interesting you say there's no time for that discussion up front, but then when you're breached, there's certainly time. And that's because
Yeah.
that's all you talk about for how long, right?
Right. Thus, why all of our budgets are reactive instead of proactive,
Correct.
because we wait for the breach.
Yeah.
Teresa, any other interesting findings out of this initial research? I know we're going to do another segment with you in a few weeks, and we're going to get into some more kind of use cases and practical experience. But any other highlights from the research you wanted to highlight?
I think one of the things that is really interesting, and this is where people need to take a look at the research and read between the lines. What we saw is that year over year, between 2023 and 2024, per project, the security budget went up 11% on average between 2023 and 2024. And you look at that, and if you're an optimist, you say, this is incredibly good news for me because I have all this extra money right now. But then you kind of go to the next page of the research and it says, here's why your budget went up because of those reactive types of things: a breach, a supply chain issue, cybersecurity, insurance requirements, and so on. So I think those are two stats to be able to take back to leaders in your organization and say, look, just as Ben was saying, we have to be able to get this under control. We have to schedule enough time to be able to have this conversation about the line of business and what we're doing on the cybersecurity side to really align and understand our appetite for risk.
I love the risk conversation. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much, Matt.
To learn why cyber resilience is key to your organization, please visit securityweekly.com/LevelBlue. We're going to take a quick break and then air our pre-recorded interviews from Black Hat USA 2024 from Theresa at LevelBlue and Menlo Security. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.